internationally on a variety of mental health issues, initiating working timelessly and trying to break the stigma around the topic within the community. Berak also speaks on a variety of Islamic and psychological issues, bridging the connection and misconceptions around Islam and mental health within the Muslim communities. Professionally, psychologically, and academic, as well as our faith and cultural audiences, having had successful workshops, media, lectures, tours in the UK, Australia, Berak continues to break the taboos around these topics to the Muslims and mainstream audiences, more events in Canadian and American in cities. Please help me welcoming Sister Berak with the Let's Talk Real Talk, the Muslim Mental Health Series.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Can everybody hear me? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين حبيب قلوبنا محمد وآل محمد. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, blessings be upon Muhammad and his family. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. When discussing inner peace or tranquility, this beautiful verse from chapter 13, Al-Ra'd, the thunder, expresses guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to attaining this inner peace through dhikr, remembrance. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ala bidhikrillah tatma'inna al-qulub. Verily, with the remembrance of Allah, do hearts find rest. So this type of remembrance can be learned and applied through, inshallah, what we are gathered here to learn today. So there will be three parts to the series. The first one, we will be taking a look at what is mental health. The second part, a little bit more academic. So the first is about mental health, the taboos around it, trying to understand what it's all about, and especially in the context of our communities. And the second part, a little bit more academic, and it's based on my own research that I did as a student and how I applied it through my clinical practice throughout the years. And so I've presented this at both Muslim audiences as well as professional audiences of therapists who are trying to learn how to treat Muslim clients. And inshallah, the third part of the series today will be a mixture of both in terms of how do we combine what we learn in terms of what is mental health, what is counseling, and all of that to the Islamic counseling theories and practice, then to put it into practical use of how do we manage stress, how to have a good life balance with that. So let's begin with that in terms of, so there's the little agenda right there for this part of the first, this part here. So here we're going to take a look at what is mental health. We're going to look at issues surrounding counseling. We're going to look at gender variances and how to provide support within the community of anybody that you know could be struggling, and the importance of self-care. So this part again is through the examining the experiential perspective of my work as a counselor that I've been doing for the last 10 years, and of course through my client stories, as well as stories from people that come to me through their struggles with mental health and mental health illnesses. So what is mental health, right? So this is obviously, if we look around here, we don't have a full place of audience because maybe it's something scary for people, maybe it's something that we haven't heard of before, or we have, but we're, we don't really talk about it. So before we even begin, for the next few hours, yes, you're going to be here for the next few hours, but it's not just going to be me who's going to be speaking. We'd like an interaction. I'm going to be throwing questions out there, comments. We're also live recording, so anybody out there could, if they're not here, you can also send in your questions and comments. So what is mental health? So the Canadian Mental Health Association, which is similar to the American, would define it as this. Mental health means striking a balance in all aspects of your life, whether it's the social, whether it's the physical, the spiritual, right? Economic and mental. So it's all about combining that. It's about having a balance. And that in itself is a learning process, right? We know that every stage of life we have our own challenges. Whether it's a young child who's trying to figure out, how to stand up or walk, that's going to cause its own challenges, right? Or speaking. And then you go on to the next stages, whether it's going into school and trying to figure out identity. And then, when you're in middle school or high school, that's a whole other world with hormones and trying to fit in with people. And then, gender. And then you have pressures from the parents and the culture and the community. So all of that can affect your overall well-being. That's already challenging as it is trying to figure out how to balance that, right? Then you get into high school, near the end of high school, then perhaps post-secondary education. Okay, what am I going to study? What's expected of me? What are the cultural and parental expectations? Am I going to be a doctor or engineer? That kind of stuff. And we always have that kind of pressure to do what is expected from us, right? So you have to balance that as well. And then you get into post-secondary school, and then there's work, and then, marriage. That's a whole other stress on its own in terms of expectations, trying to find the right spouse. Again, different expectations from the surroundings, but also yourself. Balance. How do you find balance with all of that, right? So at every stage, you're going to be encountering some kind of stress. What does the stress do to you? How do you guys respond to stress? I want you to think about this, and then we'll answer some of these questions as we go along. So all of this has an impact on your mental health, just like your physical health. When we talk about physical health, that is something that we connect with very easily, right? Diabetes, for example. Cardiovascular diseases. You break an arm. Physical things. You catch a cold. That's something that's easy, right, to understand, because why? You can see it. Assalamu alaikum. You can see it. So you don't fear it. You get it. You can see it. But what about mental illnesses? We don't see it, right? So again, let's look at the physical illnesses. So somebody who is a diabetic, right? They go to the doctor because they experience some symptoms of high blood sugar and, feeling dizzy or whatever the symptoms may be. You go to the doctor, you get a diagnosis, you get a prescription for medication, and then you are given a prescription for treatment as well. We tend to follow that, right? Or we have cardiovascular heart issues. And you notice sometimes people who have these issues almost show off to each other. Well, I got this illness and that, and look at all the medications that I have to take. And so there's almost a showing off, bragging about, look at this. Or somebody who breaks their leg, getting sympathy, right? People will cook and take food over or help. Or somebody experiences death in the community as well. You notice the support that comes in right away. You have to take food and go help these people, right? But then when you hear it on the flip side, with mental illnesses, we don't get this kind of support. No, I see shaking of heads. So you guys know exactly what I'm talking about here. So then why is it, when we understand physical illness very easily, why is it then the Muslim or the ethno-diverse community deny, avoid, or ignore mental illnesses, or even the concept of mental health, and especially those who are struggling with these illnesses, right? So when I was younger, I wanted to study psychology. And you know what? I come from an Iraqi background. So you know what we say when somebody wants to study psychology or anything related to that? Which means you're going to be just as crazy as those that you are treating. And that's exactly what I got when people say, what do you want to study? I want to study psychology. You're going to be just as crazy as those that you want to treat. It's funny when you hear it. But the reality is it is not funny when 1 in 5 people are struggling with mental illnesses. Forget mental health, right? We already looked at mental health. It's the overall balance of everything, and we know at every stage of life we're going to get encountered with stress to balance all of these things. Yet with mental illnesses, 1 in 5 people struggle with it, and we don't deal with it, we don't talk about it, because of the fear and the silence around that. So inshallah, after today, you guys are going to be mental health advocates, okay? You're going to be mental health ambassadors, and the next time there's a mental health event, this place is packed, because we're going to be able to talk about it. You guys are going to take what you've learned today, any age, any background that you're in, and you're going to share it with other people, okay? Take down notes, and if you guys want, you can get these from me afterwards as well. But take down important ideas. And like I said, we're going to share back and forth, all right? All right, so let's get to it. So we're going to look at in terms of what is mental health, what are the misconceptions, what are the main barriers, and what are the most common illnesses within our communities. So we're going to have fun with this one, okay? So we're going to look at the 10 most common misconceptions. Number 1, mental illnesses are not real. They're not real because you can't see them, right? We already discussed that. And it's still, that idea itself is very harmful in itself when you don't acknowledge that it exists. Depression exists. Anxiety exists as a result of genetics or as a result of not taking care of your stress. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But mental illnesses are not real. Number 2, they will not affect me. I'm immune. I'm Muslim. God's going to protect me. I read the Quran. I pray. I'm not going to get mental illnesses. Ever heard of that one? When you go to a sheikh and they tell you, with all the respect to the sheikhs here, because I know the sheikh here is very supportive and open with this topic. But then we've heard that, because they're frontline workers, you could say, in the community, and we go to them for support and questions and help. And some, and I know this because I've heard it from people, and I've heard it myself from sheikhs, so you got to have strong faith, you got to read more Quran, you got to do more du'as, you will not have any mental illnesses. But sheikhna didn't prevent me from getting a broken leg. Same idea. So number 3, mental illnesses are just an excuse for poor behavior. Children perhaps, or somebody who has a temper, or somebody who's abusive. Oh, he has a bad temper, that's why he beats his wife and kids. You know? So things like that, these kind of ideas. Before I go on, I should have said it right at the beginning. We will be discussing very sensitive topics that could trigger your emotions, which is why we set a limit of age starting at 14, 15, because it's very sensitive. For those of you who could be potentially experiencing any kind of mental illness or is not even aware that you are experiencing this, it could, what we are talking about, could trigger emotions within you. And if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel well, please do, leave the room if you need to, take a few breaths, relax, and then you and I could chat afterwards, okay? So just putting it out there, because this is this is sensitive information, but it's also, it could be new for you, and you could experience emotions as you listen to this. So number 4, bad parenting causes illnesses. Bad parenting. It could, to some degree. I would have to agree with that one, on that end. People with mental illnesses are violent and dangerous. I'm going to put that one. People don't recover from mental illnesses. Do you recover from a cold? Do you recover from, broken bone? Do you recover from diabetes, for example? What do you do with that? You have to maintain a healthy lifestyle. You have to take your medication on time, right? Because you want to manage the insulin levels in your body. But is there a chance, perhaps, that one day you will not have diabetes? I've heard of some stories, but for the most part, we know that's not the case. This becomes a life illness that is managed and maintained. So this could also happen as well with mental illnesses, right? People who experience mental illnesses are weak and cannot handle stress. I've actually seen amongst the strongest of people who are dealing with illnesses, yet they can still manage everything, right? So again, we have these wrong ideas and misconceptions about that. People who experience mental illnesses cannot work. Again, let's compare people with medical illnesses. Do they not work? Do they not function in society as well? Same idea here. Kids can't have a mental illness like depression because these are adult problems. Is that true? No. We know there are all sorts of mental challenges that children can experience. A child that's growing up in an abusive household, how will this affect the child's development? When they act out in school, perhaps, when we see some kids here in our centers that are acting out. Is it because of bad parenting, or that's just who they are? There has to be something going on there that could be affecting this child, right? child's withdrawn or depressed, then they may act out in different ways than adults, right? So it's not just an adult problem. It's an all age, all background, nobody's immune to it. So everyone gets depressed as they grow older. It's just part of the aging process. Not true, right? As we were just saying, it can be for any age, any background. And one of my favorite ones, especially from the Muslim community, is, jinn possession, that's what's happening, and lack of faith that leads to poor mental health and so on. Now you tell me, what are some of the common issues that we see here? Now, we are in a safe space here, okay? We are not judging. We are supporting and helping each other. So inshallah, we can feel comfortable, sharing things, and maybe you'll warm up as you get to know me and I get to know you more. So what are some of the common issues that you have in your community, or you've seen? Stress, right? Stress.
Yeah, balancing your American identity and your Muslim identity, Shia identity, all of that all together.
Absolutely. That can be stressful, absolutely. It's a big part of it, because that then has an effect on your sense of self, your self-esteem, right? What else? What are some of the challenges that you guys have experienced in the community here, within yourself, friends, in schools? What have you seen other people in schools, the challenges that they've experienced? Have you seen people who are, low energy, they don't take care of their hygiene, they're not doing well in school, they don't want to interact with other people? What does this sound like? Can you throw the word out for me? Depression. So the fact that you recognize what I'm saying here tells me that you have seen this. You have seen this in the community. Right? What else? Have you seen people who are perhaps, they're constantly worried about things. They're always overthinking. They're very jittery. They talk a lot. And breathing, they talk like that. What does that sound like? Why are the women interacting more than the guys here? Yes, women talk more. Yeah, we're going to take a look at gender variances in a bit. Yes, we do like to speak. Yeah. So anxiety, right? So again, the fact that you're telling me this, you recognize the word or the symptoms, tells me that you've seen, if not perhaps experienced it, right? Okay. So keep these all in mind, these misconceptions, and some of them have, some levels of truth in them, as we go through the rest. So what are the main barriers? What are the main barriers when we're talking about it from our community? Language, perhaps? So when I say language, I don't just mean the actual language in terms of, cultural language, Urdu or Hindi into English or Arabic or language like that. I also mean the concept behind language. So you notice when I describe the symptoms, like I said, tell me what's a mental illness that you're dealing with in the community. You couldn't tell me. Perhaps you don't know the language of the concept, or it's too soon or embarrassing to share. But when I described the symptoms, you understood that language. Why is that? Because all of us on some level have experienced this. So when I talk about stress to the Muslim or mental illness to the Muslim community, I'll say things like, well, we've all experienced at some point sadness, whether it's through the loss of a loved one, or loss itself doesn't necessarily mean death, right? Loss could mean you've lost a friend, or you've moved, or you've lost a job, or you failed in school, right? Things like that. This kind of loss will trigger a feeling of sadness within you, right? We know what that feels like. We understand. We connect that. So when we use language to describe mental illnesses, then I find that that could be a barrier when you understand that this depression could mean an overwhelming emotion of sadness for a long period of time, more than 2-3 weeks or a month. And it could mean, bad hygiene, not interacting within the community, not doing well in school, at work, relationship issues, all of that. That is a language we understand. Okay? So that is a huge barrier I find within our communities. Access. It could mean the physical access as well, meaning going to a center or seeing a counselor. Like, how many of you have actually heard of Muslim counselors? Other than me, the Muslim counselor. Right? This is not common. I did not grow up hearing about, Muslim psychologists, Muslim counselors, all of that. The second presentation, we'll have an eye-opener on that one. But I didn't grow up hearing this stuff. You hear about doctor, engineer, within our community. But you don't hear anybody saying, oh, check out this psychologist, Muslim psychologist, or this, that, unless you really need to. There's somebody in the family, but that's hush, hush, you keep it quiet. You go to talk to the sheikh, and then you don't know what to do, and then it becomes really severe, then you're sent off to the hospital or your doctor, and then it's only at that point then we come in contact with the term psychologist or counselor. We don't need to, right? So access could mean that, but it could also mean, where do we go? Where do we go to actually get counseling support? Well, I'll give you a brief rundown for that. So, first point of contact should be through your medical doctor. When you go see your medical doctor, you describe the symptoms. They could say, oh, you've got depression. Here, have some pills. That's not the solution. No. And that's probably some of the fears that we have within our community, is to take medications that we don't understand, because we're afraid we're going to rely and depend on medication instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's that stigma that we have. So you go to the medical doctor and ask for a referral. They will send you to a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a social worker. So I just threw a whole bunch of names out there, professionals in the field. We probably don't know the difference amongst them, correct? I'll explain. So a medical doctor, we know, goes to medical school and can diagnose, prescribe, and perhaps do treatment. If they can't do treatment, what do? Then they'll refer you to a psychiatrist. What is a psychiatrist? MD as well. So it's a medical doctor, somebody who has studied medicine, but is specialized in psychiatric illnesses, illnesses of the mind. Just like we have illnesses of the heart and the body, there's illnesses of the mind. A psychiatrist will deal with severe illnesses such as schizophrenia, the break of the mind, infisal, that we say in Arabic, okay? So it could be severe depression and mood disorders and personality disorders and things like that, a constant suicidality, severe illnesses, just like you have a cardiologist for heart issues or surgeon for different levels of surgery, right? So same idea. Now, they can diagnose, they can prescribe medications, and mostly we have the joke that they're pill popping. They just give you pills, see you in 1 month. Because I know the medical system here is different than in Canada, but in Canada, medical doctors as well as psychiatrists, they're covered. So there's a huge wait list to see them and access them. Here it's different because you have your own private insurance. You could potentially have faster access, but you have to pay out of your pocket, and it can be very expensive unless you have insurance. So in Canada, no. Psychiatrists, you'll be on a wait list and they'll just give you the pills and you'll see them. But some of them will do actual therapeutic intervention and treatment. All right? So with that in mind, then we have a psychologist. What is a psychologist? Who can tell me? That's part of it. But a psychiatrist, what do they study? No. Sorry, it's a psychologist. Did I say psychologist? Psychiatrist. So a psychologist studies a PhD. So they will do graduate studies, a PhD in psychology. All right? They can diagnose, assess and diagnose. So ADHD, learning disabilities, thank you, as well as psychological issues, right? But like you said, they cannot prescribe medication. So they're kind of useless that way. Yes? Can now, because there's so much in contact and access or interactions with the medical community and clients that some will. And we're moving more and more towards that kind of thing, to have like a holistic approach of therapy, for sure. Up in Canada, no, not yet. So that's a psychologist. A counselor, I'm a counselor. The name we now have, because we have moved now from anybody calling themselves a therapist and treating people to making it a registered legal body, which means you cannot practice therapy now without a license. So I'm now a registered psychotherapist. That's my title. So I do counseling and therapy, but not anybody can do that because there's a liability. You're taking people's lives in your hands, just like a doctor, a nurse, or a lawyer, right? So it's a big deal in that sense, liability. So a counselor, what is a psychotherapist? What's their background? Anybody know? When you heard my bio, you heard something with my background. Master's, right. So you do a master's in terms of the graduate studies, and that will allow you to do that, but you have to be part, again, of the registered body. So what does a counselor do? We are the most sought after ones. Why? We're cheaper. Psychologists, we're looking at minimum 170, 80, 90, 200 and up an hour. A counselor can charge that much, but if you were hired by an institution, like I work at a university, the university takes care of that. People don't pay me unless I work in a private clinic, then I can charge. I've been asked to do that, so inshallah we'll see one day. But because there's a need for it in our community, right? Because I'm only liable to the university students that I treat. I can't do counseling outside of that at the moment. So that's how we work that way. So you can be hired in an institution, they will pay your salary that way, and then it's easier for people to access counseling that way. So I'll move on now. So you guys have now a better idea in terms of who are the mental health practitioners. There's a whole other list of more, such as social workers. They're similar to counselors. They get a master's of social work and they do therapy because we do all the therapeutic work, a lot of it. But they also work in institutions and social aspects and, in what do they call it? Sorry, shelters and working with the police and things like that. All right, so now we have a better idea in terms of the resources and access of who the professionals are in the field. But that's also a limitation. We don't have enough people in the community, because a lot of people do work in this field, but we want it with our language and our accessibility, right? Culturally, we know this already, it's a challenge. We have these taboos around mental health and illnesses that prevent us from getting access and going, right? The cultural concepts and ideas that we have. Sensitive therapists, so we go to a non-Muslim therapist and we're thinking in our mind, well, they're not going to understand. They don't understand my culture. I have to be home by 8 o'clock, these kind of things. They don't understand the gender differences. They don't understand why I wear the veil. They don't understand why a man can't shake hands with a woman and back and forth. So we have these ideas in our heads that, well, that's going to prevent, there's no point in going because they're not going to understand, right? And the therapy in itself, what am I getting myself into? What is therapy, right? Like, what is therapy? Am I going to be messed up? I'm going to be sharing private things that is private inside of the home to a stranger? We grew up in a community where our parents say, you don't talk about these things. Whatever happens at home stays home. Yet the whole community knows anyways, right? We gossip, right? We speak behind people's backs. We see it happens. We know this. Finally, shame to the family. For some reason, we seem to think that mental illnesses are contagious, right? Or genetic. Well, there is a factor to that. But contagious. If you're going to be around somebody who is anxious or has a personality disorder, I think anxiety can be a little bit contagious when you're around somebody who's stressed and anxious and worried all the time. Ooh, don't you feel like your heart pounding a little bit? Like, oh, I feel a little bit nervous now. It could happen for sure. But I'm saying something like a personality disorder, right? Do you think that's going to be contagious? But we have these concepts, right? Or marrying somebody from a family where that exists. That's going to go to the next generation. So these kind of ideas. And of course, the concept of shame and fear and worry with that, right? You think it's going to catch like the flu. What else do you think could be main barriers in our community for people reaching out and getting help? Help me out here. What do you think? Mm-hmm.
I think there's a gender gap. Not a gender gap, but there is a gender gap. But there's also a generational gap.
Generational.
So if there's somebody sick in the house that has a mental illness, then
True. So that can definitely happen.
Most of us live in a joint family environment.
So with these ideas that we're saying here, let's take a look at, why mental health resources should be accessed. Why do you suppose that is? Why should they be accessed? Well, obviously to help process, right? Now, changes in your life could be, again, moving from your hometown, going to a school outside of your state, right? What are the challenges there to begin with, right? New environment, new people around you, you're away from your family, what you know, familiarity. So what's going to happen? You're going to feel lonely perhaps and challenges. So when a student goes and talks to a counselor, that person can help them transition and get them connected to supports and resources, right? Or any kind of changes in your life. It helps you get back to functioning baseline. So if you've been thrown off track by a change in your life or an illness, the counseling process or talking with somebody can help you get back on track, right? Or to work through trauma and crisis, life struggles, right? We all go through that. It's normal. And it helps you learn new skills and setting boundaries. What do I mean by setting boundaries? How many of us give, and always, and never say no to people because we have to please everybody, right? We tend to see this in a lot of people in our communities, the givers, the personality type that's always a giver, right? But learning to say no sometimes in a nice way, that can help you as well because you can just burn out all the time, right? Self-growth. Seeking support can help you grow and develop your sense of self. Those of you can get support as well, right? Through those challenges. And those of you who are lonely, right? I see a lot of lonely people in my practice. They're in a university of 35,000 people, yet they can't make friends and they're alone. International students whom I mostly see, it's really hard. By the way, I have American students too, huh? But they just look like the rest of everybody else when they speak and they don't look. But then they also experience these things, right? So talking to somebody, having somebody they can update because they don't have anybody to talk to. Maybe these people, it's hard to trust other people, no one to talk to regarding thoughts and whatnot. Okay? Now we're going to have a little bit of fun with this one. What are the most common illnesses within our community? And I want to hear from the gentleman, please. Depression, absolutely. Anxiety and depression, these are the top two to begin with. This is also common within our community. What else? Throw them out there. Yep, that's in there. What else? Yep. Yes. What else? Uh-huh. Addictions. Substance abuse. What else? Before I show the list, I want to hear from you guys. We've hit most of them. What else? Anger. Go deep with anger. What else? What happens with anger? Domestic abuse on all levels, happening with both. So yes, suicide. Didn't hear that one actually. That's a big one. And this is, when we talk about suicide, this is a very sensitive topic, yes. And we know from an Islamic perspective, it is of course haram to take one's life. Now, when somebody that's ill, and I've had lots of discussions with ulamas and scholars about this because it's an issue. So somebody who takes their life, are they going to hell? Now, we can't answer that, of course. We don't know the answer to that. But somebody that is ill, and we know this from the Quran, exemption from salah and whatnot, it's the same concept apparently, that somebody who is ill is not reliable to make the proper decisions. And so when you're that ill, again, I don't want to get too deep into it, I'm not a scholar, but I've had discussions with this because I've had to deal with it, And this day and age, we've had to deal with a lot of things that we didn't really talk openly about when it comes to these kind of things, including homosexuality, right? I have clients that come in, and they're Muslims, and they're struggling. I don't want to feel this way. How do I deal with this? I don't want to go to hell. And this is what I hear. We know what our faith says, but does our faith also say to hurt these people when they're struggling with these issues? I don't agree with you, lakum dinakum waliya dini, right? You have your belief, I have my belief. But it doesn't mean we hurt people, especially if we're, the religion of peace and love. How are you supposed to bring people in and help them, right? So these are things that are happening in our community, yet we don't talk about them. We don't know how to respond to them. We don't know the language to use, and it can take us off guard, and then you start saying things that could sound very phobic, against, right? So we have to be careful in terms of the language, how we use when we say, this is what our faith says, and then your behavior when it comes to these things. It has to be in line with what our faith says. So yes, addictions in itself can range from a variety of things, not just drinking, not just drugs. It could be gambling. It could be online video games. You know how many students I see, clients who have the issue of just being in front of video games for 12 to 16, 20 hours a day. I kid you not. I had a client who told me 16 hours a day. International student. Imagine the money they have to pay, the classes they're not going to. But this person was dealing with what? Depression. They're lonely, they don't interact with people. They interact online with other people shooting and killing other people, you know. So this is how they deal with their loneliness and their depression. So, and yes, the issue of pornography. This is happening within our communities, but again, we don't talk about it. We don't know how to deal with it when a wife catches her husband or vice versa or whatever. There's a deeper seated issue here. We talk about these in the Mumbar now, and I've been really happy to see the last year that the big speakers are hitting these topics and talking about them now because it wasn't there before, right? And I'm really happy to hear that they're taking the stand and talking about it from an Islamic perspective. But we need more people in the field talking more about it from a practical point of view, because we shouldn't be talking about things we don't know about, right? But we definitely need to be bringing this up on the Mumbar, in the centers, because it's happening in the centers for everybody. So mood disorders, and this is very common, believe it or not. You know, you could have a partner who's amazing with you one day, and the next they're beating you, or they're ignoring you, or shafting you. What is going on? And then it makes you feel like, I'm going to use the word, makes you feel crazy, crazy making. This happens, right? So these things are happening. This is a common one, borderline personality disorder, but we don't have a name for it. I hear people come and describe to me, you know, my husband is just loves me one day and is praising me and all of that. And the next day he's ignoring me. He almost says that he hates me. He wants to go have another wife. He's ignoring the children, hurting the children. And I don't understand what's going on. And then that's why you're in that mode of crazy making. I've heard it from the husbands too, the men. You know, she takes money from me and I keep buying her stuff and she just is not good enough. We want more and more and more and more, showing off to her friends and da-da-da-da. We know this. We know this. It's happening. What is going on? And the person is trying to think, have I lost my mind? What's going on? We don't have a name for it. There are many names for it. One of them is called the borderline personality disorder. And bipolar disorder, where, you know, you have extreme highs of happiness, you're floating, you know, nothing can stop you, you're taking on 10 projects at the same time, you're doing it, you're high, and all of a sudden, boom, crash. You can't get out of bed, you can't interact with your community, you can't go to school, can't go to work, your hygiene is terrible, you just feel sad all of the time, to the point where you even want to take your life. Have you seen people like that in the community? And then you're wondering, what is wrong with them? Are they crazy? That's what comes to our mind. So these are things that are happening. And again, we don't have a term for it. We don't understand it. And it makes us really confused. So we talked about this one. This is one of my favorites, by the way, because I see the young people, right? And they come in, they talk to me like, yeah, I know, I've been there. I grew up in a traditional Iraqi, Karbala'i household, all right? And this is me at school, you know, at home, you know, we're all like that. When we go to the centers, it's all like that. But then I go to high school, and it's like, oh, what's going on? Like, it's a completely different world. And then so you have to balance, and you mentioned that earlier, the cultural balance. We already talked about the challenges in each stage of development, right? And on top of that, you have your cultural and your religious, and then your parental, right? And then the expectation of your grandparents, And I know in this community, in my community, you know, a lot of the grandparents will live, right? And we take care of our elders. We don't ship them off to homes like we see in the Western society. Although now the trend is people are doing that, right? Just like our parents took care of us as children, we take care of our parents, and it's our duty, and it's ingrained in us, right? But what happens when you have the elders living in your home? Tell me, you tell me. Well, we know that for sure. Give me scenarios, what you've seen. Come on, guys, I've been sharing a lot. I want to hear from you. The expectation of marriage, perhaps? So you're going to marry only an engineer. You're only going to marry from this cultural background. You're only going to marry from this family. You're going to marry your cousin. I know this is my culture. Do you guys have that too? You marry cousins? Yeah. So the expectation is you're going to marry cousins. And apparently, even right before you were born or a few hours into birth, apparently you are already connected to marry somebody for the rest of your life. Sounds like the Middle Ages to me, personally, But this happens, right? Tribal mentality. There's some beautiful tribal cultures. Yes, we know this from an Islamic perspective, that if the cultural practice doesn't go against their faith, it's encouraged to have. It's beautiful to celebrate the differences, right? But then you're living in the home, and the parents are saying you're not allowed to talk to boys, you're not allowed to talk to girls. We live in an integrated society. We don't live in isolation, right? And our faith doesn't say to completely segregate like that. How else are you supposed to intermarry within your own if you don't have these kind of interactions, right? This is normal, human. But then we have boundaries of respect and halal and haram, of course. What are some of the cross-generational cultural issues? I want to hear it from this community. Nothing? I don't believe it. Because I've heard them already. Share, guys, come on. What are some of the challenges? I don't want to pick on people, I just want to shout it out there. Perhaps, simple one, expectation of dress, right? The younger generation want to wear tight, fashionable clothing, and the elder generation's, you're not walking out of the house like that. That's unacceptable. That's a simple one, right? But you tell me, what's a generational issue here? Just even maybe in the way that we speak. Eating health, thank you. That's a big one. Salads don't exist in this community. I kept asking, where's the salad, where's the vegetables, where are the fruits? Yeah, that's a big one, healthy eating. The oil that's used in the cooking here, wow. Sorry? Child raising, excellent, thank you, right? So things like that, right? Child raising, definitely. That's a big one. So whatever the older generation thinks is the right way, but then this becomes a clash and a problem in the household and the identity of the growing person. Perhaps if you intermarry different cultures as well, how is that going to impact language and culture and expectations, all of that, right? Okay, so we've talked a lot about this one, we get it. We talked about identity issues. So let me tell you a story. So the high school story when I went to school. During the day, we have these things at my high school called air bands. Do you have anything like that here? So basically what it is, people going up on stage mimicking music videos and pretending they're these pop stars and singing and dancing. It's ridiculous, And I remember walking by the auditorium, I'm like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I'm not going to go watch that. That night, my community rented out the auditorium for a majlis. Same stage. And I remember as a 15, 16-year-old, I walked into the auditorium, I'm like, oh, what was going on that stage earlier in the day? Whereas at night, we had a majlis, Rabbi Abdullah up on the stage, the same stage where they had music video mimicking, So as a 16-year-old, I stood there and I watched, and I'm like, wow, during the day I'm this, again, my household, and then when I'm out at school, it's here, and then at night, that. What does that do to your mentality? What does that do for you and your self-development and awareness and your Muslim identity? What does that do for you? It has a huge impact on your mental health and your psychological well-being, for sure, right? So things like that. We talked about PTSD and wars and refugees, and so with that, sometimes we see our elders dealing with this, and we're not even aware that they're dealing with this issue, the symptoms that they exhibit, whether it's nightmares or being triggered, remembering something, retelling stories, or perhaps not sharing their past or what's going on, right? So these are things that are happening again. And we see this more now in light of what's happening in the world and the influx of refugees that are coming or not in this part of the world down south, right? So it is happening, and that has a huge impact on us. We know in the countries where we have families living in unsafe, war-torn countries, what is that going to do to them? And I've had many students, unfortunately, who have family in Syria and Iraq and Pakistan and India, and where you have these attacks. And we know this is the Shia genocide that's going on in the world and the attack. We've all been impacted in one way or another. When you hear that a family member has been killed in a suicide bomb in Iraq, and this happened in my family, how do you respond to that? We've almost gone to the point where we've become desensitized. We're numb now. We've heard it so much. And my family, when I ask them questions, how do you deal with this? I say, ta'awadna, we got used to it. My young cousins who go to university, it's heartbreaking. We say goodbye to our family when we leave in the morning as though we are not coming back. Ali Akbar, Qasim. That's the reality every day. It's heartbreaking. That's why we shouldn't be immune to it. That's why our majalis and all of that, they remind you of all of that. And this one here is a huge one, of course. One of the biggest ones. The effects on that. Like I said, on both males and females, it happens to both. And we don't talk about that. We always say it's the woman that is being abused. The men are also being abused. And I don't necessarily mean violently, physically. I mean mentally, financially, emotionally. How many good men in our communities are being taken advantage of by their partners or women or anybody else? We don't talk about the flip side of it. And I always bring attention to it because I've been on cases in the community where I've seen it. Most part, it is the women and the children, the vulnerable, right, of our community that do get, that is silent, really, silent. Let's take this a step further when we talk about divorce. Huge taboo in our community. Makes people uncomfortable. It's happening. It exists. People need to get divorced from these type of situations. What does a woman hear when she goes to a Maulana? What does she hear? Be patient, like Sayyida Zainab. Is this the right time to be using this example? Humorous, but sad at the same time. Be patient. Or try to change this. Try to do this so he doesn't get upset with you. When the fault is he's raising his hand. Is this allowed in our faith? No. Basic human rights here. One time is one too many times, and it's happening. Now, the Maulanas themselves, right? We know this. The level of corruption that is happening within the community as well. I know these are not comfortable topics. I see them. I work in the field. I've been on cases. I'm helping people in these cases where there is so much corruption because their pockets are being lined up by richer families, perhaps, or family ties, to keep the woman silent from speaking out. And this is an epidemic, a dilemma that is happening all over the world, and we're seeing it these days. Just go on social media and see the people in power, the people at the top. They don't necessarily have to be clerics or religious leaders, organizations. And because they have the power, they can hurt and abuse and assault, and they feel that no one's watching. When who's watching? You may not get your time now, but there's the akhirah that they forget. But they're blind. They're in denial. They've done nothing wrong. But the pockets are thickening. Power. When people are in power, and this is again the mentality and the psychology, is huge psychology involved with authority and power, especially when it comes to violence and domestic abuse, whether it's in the home, where the man thinks he's the god of the house, and you've heard that, I'm sure. Rabbul Bayt, god of the house, right? Or you see it at the organizational level. In any kind of issue, but especially when it comes to domestic violence and abuse. It is happening. And it's disgusting. Where the man, for example, and we've heard this, we know this, will marry like the man and woman, they're not together. He will not divorce his wife as a tool, as a power tool to get the children, to get money or whatever. We know this, right? But he will go marry. He will go remarry, and the woman is stuck for years in this position because the Maulanas will not give the divorce. She left. It's your fault. Well, there's no money to give, or this or that. We know the stories. What does this do to your mental well-being? What does this do to a child who's seeing his mother like this? What does this do to a child who sees the father doing this, and vice versa? It has a huge impact on your development, does it not? I want you to think about this, and I know it's happening here. I know it's happening in every community I go to, and we need to be talking about these issues more to get the proper help for people who need it. Islamophobia, this is a big one, especially in the States, right? The fear of people going out in public with their hijab. We've heard the stories of women taking off their hijab so they don't get targeted, right? What does Islamophobia do? It creates that fear that you cannot be part of society and that you will get hurt. What does it do? It leads you to isolation, right? It creates anxiety and fear. And depression, yes it does. So these things can happen, right? And we have to understand the impact on this. This can be like a whole other presentation by itself. I won't get too much into it. Let's move on. Have I missed anything? Some of the challenges within our community? Postpartum depression. Can you tell us what that is? Right. And so what is the misconception around that? Hormonal, yeah. So this is where biology comes into play, right? So this is also a common one. I'll put that in, so next time I do this presentation, we'll have that. All right. So, yes? Yeah? Bullying. Absolutely. Bullying on the school ground as a result of what? Could be from Islamophobia as a result of?
Well, not just even within our community.
Within here. Okay. So power dynamics, cliques, family, classes, yeah. Superiority complexes, attitude, family, tribal wars, yeah, things like that. Grief.
I don't know, maybe the person himself or herself doesn't want to deal with it, the family that's around them doesn't want to deal with this individual because it's so difficult going through it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So having more understanding, which is ironic considering as Shia Muslims, you know, part of our culture is the mourning season. And we grieve freely for Abu Abdullah and Masa'ib for Ahl al-Bayt, right? Alhamdulillah, there's a blessing in it. Yet we don't understand how to apply that in a healthy way when we experience our losses, right? I did a whole lecture on that at the beginning of Muharram. Maybe we'll do it here one day too. The psychology behind grieving and connecting it to the majalis and how people, let's say with depression, attending these majalis could help or could not. It's really fascinating stuff. So what is counseling? Now you guys tell me. I've told you in different ways what counseling is all about throughout this presentation so far. What do you think counseling is? Yes, what else? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So there's a technical definition. Professional guidance of the individual by utilizing psychological methods, especially in collecting case history data, using various techniques of the personal interview, and testing interest and aptitudes. A mouthful. Here's my definition, the Berak Hussain definition. A confidential, safe place for anybody to come and talk about whatever it is that's on their mind, to help you reach your goals, solve your problems, or provide you with strategies to cope with challenges. So it's no judgment, acceptance. It could be a short-term thing or a long-term thing. And again, talking about all these issues that we were chatting about, right? And if something that I can't do to help, because we all have our specialties and things that we're capable of, then we refer on to the appropriate resource. I'm going to speed things up now a little bit in terms of this, because we do have a bit more. So why do we avoid counseling? We know already, we've talked about it, right? The stigma, the fear, not understanding what it's all about, and again, within the community, the shame of somebody, who's going to hear about this. Even people who are dealing with mental illnesses themselves will avoid it. Why do you think that is? You tell me. Yeah. Sorry? Denial. Absolutely. Denial. That could be a huge one. Again, the shame of being found out. People know this about you. What else? Yes. People will start, not interacting the same way with you anymore because they don't know how to deal with it, right? And so my question is counseling only for people who are affected with mental illnesses? It's for anybody, right? Like we were saying, a student who moves away from home, different challenges in life, all of these things. And so you want to talk to somebody, like you were saying, a third-party objective who's not going to judge, because family and friends sometimes are going to say the same thing. You're in the same circle. Where you talk to somebody who has a different perspective, that can be very different, right? Okay. Interesting when it comes to gender variances. First, one of the first things we said right at the beginning is women like to talk. Like right away we threw that out there, right? So Muslim men usually deny or have more negative attitudes towards seeking help. Why? Good one. The men don't even ask for directions when they get lost. You think they're going to ask directions to get self-help? No, that's a good joke. Sorry, I mean, no disrespect, but you guys know that when you get lost, you don't ask for directions. Although Siri now tells you how to do it. And you'll listen to Siri, yes, but you won't listen to other females in the family. Change your accents, okay. So why is that? Well, the statistics were strongly gendered, with Muslim women expressing higher levels of need for mental services and men had more negative attitudes. Well, the obvious answer is what? Nature, right? Like we were saying, that, we tend to be more emotional. Perhaps women are used to talking more with each other, right? And sharing emotions. Men are not. Since childhood, be a man, don't cry. No, don't cry there. You notice how we do that? So this is how nurturing comes to nature. We don't encourage that. Again, I find it ironic in the Shia culture, because, mashallah, the majalis, those tears come like that, subhanallah. But there's also a fakeness, let's be real. Come on, we know when the lecture is going on, we're all gossiping and not listening in our minds. As soon as it's crying time, it's crying. As soon as it's latam time, we're doing it. But is it genuine? We don't know. He knows. I know, this is my observation when I attend majalis in different communities. Although you guys, mashallah, you have an awesome community. You're so into, I was watching last night, people were so into it. Like when the Maulana was speaking, everybody was listening. And I know in my community, for some reason, people take that as a reason to talk. I don't know, I find it very disrespectful. But I found there's an amazing amount of engagement. I came on a good day? Now, don't ruin your reputation. I'm going to go back to Canada saying this, But I noticed there was quite a bit of interaction with the people up on the Mamba. Maybe you had really engaging, apparently they're world famous, and I didn't know till I got here. Yeah, I spoke with one of them yesterday, by the way. Anyhow, so this attitude that we have of nurturing the males in the family when they're very young, in terms of, it's not, you're a guy, you talk. This shows later on in these statistics here when we talk about how we share and talk and seeking help. This, by the way, is for the general population, but more so within the Muslim diverse community as well, because we are not talking about mental health, right? So is it true that mental health illnesses affect more women than men in the Muslim population? So you guys are saying it affects women more? I want to hear why you think that. Are you saying your gender does not think? Okay, so Wow, there's a lot of slinging back and forth today, yeah. Well, no. The answer is no. So it's not that there are more illnesses. The question is there more illnesses with women than men? The answer is no. The answer is the more women will come out to talk about it. The statistics will show there's more women coming out. Not because there are more illnesses with women, right? That's why. And so this is, again, the same thing with mainstream mental health issues in the community. Men don't talk. It shows weakness if they share problems in their family. Men don't cry. And we know this even more so within our communities. And what's ironic, I'll tell you this though, what's ironic is that who do I see most often in my office? Arab men. Ironically, I've noticed in the last 10 years, I have seen a lot more Arab men coming in to seek counseling. Because a lot of them are from international countries. They come in and they get in trouble because they're busy with marijuana, they're busy with drugs, they're busy fooling around, they're busy wasting their parents' money, and they're failing at the end of the year, okay? And they're sent to come see me. And then so we work on the issues to help rectify. Why were you doing this? What was going on here and that? Again, dealing with family cross-generational expectations. They're in engineering and they hate it, they're not doing well. They'd rather be in arts, they'd rather be in social science, they'd rather be in business or economics, whatever. Depression as well, because they're lonely, they're away, so they throw themselves doing other things to numb the pain, right? So finally they wake up, they start feeling the pain of things. Alhamdulillah, those who take the advice, they get back on track, they do what they gotta do, help them speak with their families. I get some parents on the phone talking, I'm trying to explain to them, depression is this, what is depression, and so there's that, especially from the other countries, so again, I use the language, especially if I'm speaking Arabic, then it's like, oh, you've got an older sister to help you there. I'm like, no, but yes, I'll be there to support as much as I can. And in the end, what I find, alhamdulillah, they get back on track, they go on to their second or third year, they're doing well, they come see me regularly, and look what they do. These young men succeed, but then they look out for the younger people that are coming in, almost like mentors. They smack them on the head and say, go see Berak, That's happened, subhanAllah, it's happened many times. So I find it really ironic that even though we talked about these statistics here, I still tend to see a lot that come into the office. Because alhamdulillah, I've got a good reputation in terms of, and the counseling in itself, that is confidential, which is one of the biggest issues in our community when it comes to seeking help. Confidentiality. We are liable now, we get a lot of trouble. All right, so let's just take a quick look at this in terms of support. How do you help somebody or, in the community or somebody, how do you help them? We mentioned this earlier. What do we say? You can go see a doctor, right? We want to create a culture around accepting and understanding. Use the analogy of broken bones. Again, you see it, you understand it, but you don't see a broken spirit. Okay? So we want to be able, like if somebody comes to you and says, I've had thoughts of cutting, of harming myself, or killing myself, I'm really depressed, it's not your job to be the counselor. It can be very overwhelming for you. But today you've learned some things, and by the end, inshallah, you've learned more in terms of being supportive and understanding to this person in front of you. They're coming and telling you, I have these emotions, I have these thoughts, I have these. What can you do? Take them to the doctor. Take them to see somebody. Take them to an elder in the community that you trust. I'm sure you have people here that you trust that you can get support, right? Especially when it comes to confidentiality, if that's a worry. We want to create a culture around opening up and having people feel that they can come and get support and help. Now, I looked up here in Atlanta what you guys have. You have Muslim counselors. You do. I just Googled it, and that's what showed up. So if you guys want, you can message and contact me after. I'll send that to you. But easily just Google it. And they also have depression groups. There's a whole bunch more. I just put 2 here. So you do have it. Finally, the importance of self-care. Learn how to ask for help. So learn how to ask for help and why it's important. We talked about that earlier. How to take care of yourself. The third presentation that we're going to take a look at will be very detailed about that. I'm not going to do that right now. Okay? But basically, what's self-care for those of you who are not coming back, just quickly, it's a routine of balance with eating well. Somebody mentioned eating healthy, right? Healthy sleep, Man, your community with sleep? What is this? Children sleeping at 1, 2, 3 a.m.? Are you kidding me? 8 p.m. Put them in bed. They need 12, 3 hours of sleep. How are they supposed to function in school the next day? Doesn't work. Yeah, okay, Friday night when there's a majlis, that's different, you know? But still, the Muharram, yeah, we get it. Ramadan, we get it. But not every day. The children are going to school, their brains are fried, they're not functioning, they're not doing well, and then you yell at your kids for not doing well in school. Come on, let's be responsible with that. Our body needs that sleep. 12, 13, 14 hours for young children. 8 o'clock, sleep. We need 7 to 8 hours of sleep as adults. Teenagers sleep 12 hours, by the way. The hormones and changes in their body make them so tired and sleepy. And what do parents say about their teens? Lazy. Please, parents, educate yourself on. Remember, you were a teenager? But maybe as you were a teenager, your parents did not care about that, didn't listen. It was a different type, right? But we have to understand these things and how our bodies work. But sleep is very important. Exercise, right? Spiritual inner peace, medication if you need it when you're ill, good relations with family and friends. Come see a counselor if you need to as well, okay? All right, finally I'd like to end off with this beautiful quote for this part of our presentation from Imam Ali alayhi salam. Your remedy is within you, but you do not sense it. Your sickness is from you, but you do not perceive it. You presume you are a small entity, but within you is enfolded the entire universe. You are indeed the evident book, by whose alphabet the hidden becomes manifest. Therefore, you have no need to look beyond yourself. What you seek is within you, if only you reflect. It's beautiful. There's so much psychology from Ahl al-Bayt that they teach us, and if we just, that word in itself right there at the end encompasses everything that we talked about so far. Reflection. Because with reflection, self-awareness, and finally you take the steps to seek the support outside for within you. That's how I interpret it when it comes to psychology and mental health. Thank you for the poster, by the way. It was one of the best posters I've seen. I got some comments from my international friends who do this stuff. They're like, man, that's a great poster. Anyhow, so we're going to take a 10-minute break. We do have snacks. Yes, because I said I would like healthy snacks for the audience members to keep up the energy. And when I heard what was going to be given at first, I almost threw the Berak attack temper. No chips, anyhow. So let's take a quick break. 10 minutes, we'll be back. The second part, I'm telling you straight up, okay, is deep, it's academic, but it's amazing when it comes to Islamic counseling psychology and concepts. Bring notes, we're going to take notes on that one, okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So please be on time. None of this Desi time, huh? Or Arab time. North American time, 10 minutes. So we're back here at 3:55. I will start at 3:55. Sorry? Oh. No, we're changing. Have snacks right now. Okay, that's fine. Push that. It was good. Any comments, not questions? That's great. Okay. Did he cut?
No, the first